Indigenous peoples as non-Indigenous peoples. My name is Ry Moran. I'm the Associate University Librarian Reconciliation here at the university. Dijanakas Wapikanu Mikanakdodem. I'm Métis, more or less raised here, despite being born in the prairies, and have spent the last 10 plus years living in Treaty 1 territory, the homeland of the Métis, where I spent time with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation. I want to begin especially by acknowledging the fire keepers that have been keeping this very beautiful fire, this very important fire burning all day today. Thank you again. These two gentlemen were also here earlier this year as we lit a 4-day ceremonial fire to honor the 215 children that were remembered, found at the Tecumloops Secwepemc Kamloops Residential School. That number 215 you see around the campus too, and I really want to acknowledge the artistic talents of Carrie Newman, who has given us these beautiful designs and the banners that we see around here, reminding us each and every day of our responsibilities to remember those children, to hold them in our hearts, and to never forget what happened. So thank you on behalf of all of us, Carrie, for your talents. So too, you may see these small cards over here at the table. One of the things we did in the summer is we were trying to find ways of dealing with the intense emotions and the profound sorrow I think many of us felt when we discovered those children at Kamloops, was to offer some thoughts or prayers for them through the fire. You can think of this fire as a way of talking to them, if you will. So if you wish, there are small cards that you can find over here. The fire will be put out later today. We are going to take the ashes down to the water and return them in a good way. But if there are particular thoughts that you want to say to all those that have walked before us, all those generations still to come, that's an opportunity by which you can do so. Our panel is going to be followed by remarks from our president, Kevin Hall, who's in the audience here. Thank you for being here. Robina Thomas has already spoken today. Thank you, Robina, for your fine words. It has been a day of ceremony, and this morning we started off hearing not only from Robina but also from residential school survivor Mark Atleo, reminding us that this history is not in the distant past, that survivors are still very much with us here today. And I'd like to acknowledge any and all residential school survivors here with us. We thank you for your strength and we thank you for being here. I'd also like to acknowledge all the intergenerational survivors that are also present with us as well, who carry those experiences of the survivors in the previous generations that were forced to attend those sites of assimilation and cultural genocide. With that, I will introduce our panel members today, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. You're in for an absolute treat as we speak with these three absolutely incredible members of our community here that have been doing exceptional work for decades and decades and decades now. It is very humbling to even share space with them. I'm going to commence with introducing Dr. Dawn Smith, who is Nuu-chah-nulth, but grew up in WSÁNEĆ territories in Sept. Dawn received her educational degree in educational leadership and policy from the Faculty of Education at the University of British Columbia. Her research focus is in Nuu-chah-nulth self-determination, feminism, strict laws of nature and medicines, and decolonization. Dr. Smith has the forthcoming publication, Decolonizing Our Futures, Neo-Colonial Criminal Injustice and the Mass Imprisonment of Indigenous Women, forthcoming. Thank you, Dawn, for being here today. I'll next introduce Carrie Newman, who I'm proud to call a friend. Carrie is a multidisciplinary artist, Indigenous artist, master carver, filmmaker, author, and public speaker. In his artistic practice, he strives to highlight Indigenous social and environmental issues as he examines the impacts of colonialism and capitalism, harnessing the power of material truth to unearth memory and trigger the necessary emotion to drive positive change. Carrie is also interested in engaging with community and incorporating innovative methods derived from traditional teachings and Indigenous worldviews into his process. Highlights from his career including being selected as the master carver of the Cowichan 2008 Spirit Pole and the witness blanket made of items collected from residential schools, government buildings, and churches across Canada. And if you haven't had an opportunity to spend time with that witness blanket, I would strongly encourage you to do so. It is an absolute incredible honoring of residential school survivors and a powerful piece of monumental art that, like so much of what's happening right now, will be around in this country for ever now and has been a significant contribution to the overall process of healing in this country. Val Napoleon, director of the JID, which is the Indigenous Law Degree Program, and soon to be acting dean of the Faculty of Law, joining us as well. Val is research chair of the Law Foundation, chair of Indigenous Justice and Governance. Prior to joining the Faculty of Law at UVic in 2012, she was cross-appointed with the faculties of Native Studies and Law at the University of Alberta. Her current research focuses on Indigenous legal traditions, Indigenous legal theories, pedagogies, law and precedent, legal institutions, and legal research methodologies, Indigenous feminism, citizenship, self-determination, and governance. You've got the bases covered. Some of her major initiatives include this groundbreaking world-first JID program here at the University of Victoria, and establishing the Indigenous Law Research Unit with a number of research partnerships with Indigenous communities and groups in BC, across Canada, and with international connections. So we're going to start our conversation. I'm going to have a seat, and we're going to start a conversation on the future. And maybe, Val, I can start with you, if that's all right. You know, as I just think about the critically important work that's happening on Indigenous laws, I mean, we saw through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's work, or see it echoed in the TRC's calls to action at least, that these legal orders are something that are absolutely essential for reconciliation to occur. And I just wonder if you can help, you know, all of those joining here understand what lay ahead of us as we begin to reclaim these important traditions.
Thank you. Before answering that question,
Yeah.
I just want to share something that I heard in about the 1980s from a number of Gitxsan people in the northwest of the province. And the term that they used to think about the future was the breath of our grandparents. And so just think of that in terms of the breath of our grandmothers, the breath of our grandfathers. You know, we're here today on the breath of our ancestors, and our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the next generations, are going to be on ours. And so I just think if we can think about this moment as extending into the past as well as into the future, that changes how we think, how we experience the present, but it also informs the dreams that we can have for our future. So I wanted to share that. The other thing to share on the Indigenous Law Degree Program, you know, we have students graduate with 2 law degrees. When we were seeking support for this from across Canada and elsewhere in the world, we had international conversations about this program as well. Murray Sinclair, now Senator Murray Sinclair, said that the Indigenous Law Degree Program was the epitome of reconciliation. So it was when we were talking about it, and it continues to be, because it's fundamentally about our citizenships, our Indigenous people's citizenships, about governing ourselves according to our legal traditions, about our international relations with other peoples, about our economies, about how we treat one another and take care of one another. This is all the business of law. And we know that Indigenous law hasn't gone anywhere in Canada, but it's been made invisible. So the work that the students have been doing, that my colleagues and I have been doing, and others across Canada, is re-articulating and rebuilding law as a part of how we govern ourselves, as all societies do. We all are lawful peoples. And so that's a part of the way forward now. So when I think about the work of the students and what we've been doing, you know, the students that we accepted, the first cohort in 2018, they're graduating this spring. This is amazing. Woo. And it's a 4-year program. We've just accepted our 4th cohort. So for the first time, that law school has 100 Indigenous law degree students. And so they're from across Canada, and they're going to be going out there into Indigenous governance, Indigenous business, Indigenous legal practice, and they are also walking on the breath of their grandparents, their grandmothers, and their grandfathers. And so I'm grateful to be a part of their journey, and I just think that they and everybody who made it possible should be celebrated.
That is so exceptional to think about these leaders of today who are also going to be leading us forward through years to come and disrupting these systems that have caused really so many problems along the way. So, Dawn, I know you think about the future all the time, and what comes to mind as we're starting this discussion here today?
First of all, I'd just like to acknowledge that I am a visitor to the Coast Salish, to the Lekwungen territories, and I take that very seriously and acknowledge any of the survivors that are here today, and thank the panel here as well to be here with us today. I guess I think about my grandson, who's 12 years old, and what Orange Shirt Day means to him, and how he comes to understand the long, painful history in our family of his great-grandparents and grandparents having gone to residential school. So I am a survivor, if you like. His grandfather, my ex-husband, is also a survivor. So I think about what the future looks like for him, and I become a little concerned and a little afraid, because at our doorstep is, this ugly history and contemporary reality of Indigenous people that doesn't escape us. So I want to say I'm optimistic, but at the same time, when I think about the kind of racism that we're confronted with on a regular basis that involves violence and dehumanization, I struggle to think of the future and what that could mean for my grandson, particularly in this last election, not having Indigenous issues even on the agenda. So that signals me a concerning future. And so I have to work even harder to ensure that when it's his time to come here, that the road continues to be paved, with a good heart and a good mind, so that he can experience it without having to contend with all the garbage. We have to spend time with the truth. And this is where Sheila Rogers, we had a brief moment together, and I mentioned that I had quoted her in my dissertation, because I had heard her talk a number of years ago and mention, as a non-Indigenous woman, that we had gone from this idea of reconciliation, like we just bypassed truth. And so I'm suggesting as a country that we need to spend some time with the truth. And it's ugly and it's uncomfortable. But that's the work that we have to do sure that when my grandson gets here that we've worked out all the crap. So, you know, I've been taught to be optimistic, and I want to be optimistic, but I'm not really sure what this all means yet.
Truth before reconciliation, and we hear that over and over again, and it's such a powerful concept. And even this week we started off with a panel discussion again with Robina, and we said we watched the Return to the Healing Circle about the Cooper Island Residential School, and part of the film there was talking about being in a talking circle, that you talk about things until they don't need to be talked about anymore. And clearly we're still in that time of speaking truth right now. And Carrie, I know you're engaged in these questions and this work all the time. I mean, what's the future look like in your mind? What are you thinking of?
I think that I've a couple of the things I've heard here really resonate with the way that I think about what it takes to go forward in a good way. Because I've always kind of been taught to honor the past, respect the present, and take responsibility for the future. And so what that means to me is that when we talk about the future, we can't just look forward. We have to bring with us all of the things that have led us to where we are right now. And I think that's where that truth part comes in, and that's where the uncomfortable aspect of how this country was formed comes in. How many times have each of us been asked, when are we going to get over it? You know, how many times have we been asked, what can I do? Or you know, like let's just move on together. But I think what gets left behind in that kind of a mindset is that sitting, what you were just talking about, sitting with the truth. Because I've grown up kind of in two streams. I've benefited from and been harmed by colonialism in my family and in my personal life. And when I was younger, I had this sort of great sense of pride about what it meant to be Canadian. Because of all the things that I was told Canada stood for. But as I grew up and I learned and I experienced the reality of what Indigenous people face, continue to struggle with in all kinds of contemporary issues, it became really clear that we are not that country. And so I've started calling it humble exceptionalism. Because I've also been a part of a lot of conversations with people in this country who kind of look down their noses at things that are happening in other parts of this world. And I say, look what's going on right here. Look at the foundation of this country, because the foundation is not one of a welcoming society. It's one of genocide. And that's what colonialism comes down to. It's one of destruction when you look at the environment. So I know that's really heavy, but I think that you're right, we have to sit with it. And then we have to find a way to start to plan the way that our ancestors did, the breath of our old ones. Because if we only ever plan in a 4-year cycle or a 10-year plan, then we're not actually making a plan that takes into account all of the things that we need to consider to make a good decision now, a decision that will be good for the people of the future. So lately in my artistic practice, that's where I'm starting to look. I'm starting to try to think of ways to stretch out time in our imaginations, to make us think, to force myself to think about, 50 years. I think about my daughter, but What about beyond her? I've heard that phrase, our children's children's children, all my life. And what does that mean? That means that the things that I do now need to not just benefit me and the people around me today. It needs to be something that is good for my children's children's children. It needs to be good for generations into the future. And if we start to think about the future in that way, then I think we start making better decisions for ourselves today as well.
It's powerful, Carrie. Val, I think that, as Carrie's been saying, I mean, we're talking about long-term change, and those words I've even heard spoken this week, even, again, coming back to Murray Sinclair, he did an interview with CBC, and he said, I think he reminded us that this work of reconciliation is the work of generations. There's no magic wand here. This is going to be hard work for days, weeks, months, years to come, generations to come. But, I mean, you must have this vision for how Indigenous legal orders are going to create this new future for us. Can you give us a window into perhaps the change that you're forecasting?
Oh, I think that there are many rich possibilities, and you know, Doris Lessing said something like, you know, we don't study the past or pay attention to the past just for the sake of doing it. We have to pay attention to the past because it's still in us. The patterns are still in us, and so part of going forward is understanding those patterns and trying to make sure that the future is in the generations that they're not going to be replicating that. And so that's all a part of creating that. I think the first thing that we all need to do is to think about you know, what is it that healthy citizenries are able to do, healthy Indigenous citizenries across these lands? And one of the things that is going to enable us to have hope, to be able to keep going despite the grief and the pain and the sorrow, despite all of that, the way forward is going to be for us to build a repertoire of narratives in which we solve problems in a way that doesn't oppress one another, in a way that holds each other up, in a way that draws on our legal resources and our legal histories and so on that we have and that we can take forward. So the kinds of things that I'm seeing are law students as part of their projects starting to assist with elders projects. Law students being able to, and work being able to be a part of environmental assessments, a part of thinking about child welfare in the future, a part of what does human dignity from an Indigenous legal perspective look like, what does inclusion look like, and drawing on all of those so that we can practically build ways of governing, practically rebuild economies. You know, we need dreams and we need practice, and they need to come together, but our dreams need to be big enough to be able to encompass all that's possible. And if we can't have our dreams restricted by the pain of the past, like that, we need to learn from that. But there's so many ways to go forward, and people are doing it right across the country as well as elsewhere in the world, and so and I think that wherever we can, those moments need celebrating, and I really want to push that because it's so important. Like, I want my grandsons, and I have 4 of them, I want them to be able to see Indigenous peoples celebrating other Indigenous peoples at the drop of a hat, at every opportunity, because there are opportunities.
Beautiful vision. Hey, Dawn, any thoughts?
Well, I think, yeah, just about the great deal of work that we have ahead of us, and how we don't have the capacity. And I think we need to build the stamina through these conversations so that we can move forward in healthy ways, right? So we're coming up against struggle and resistance and, you know, this idea of getting over it and that sort of thing. But I think, you know, part of sitting with the truth is building the stamina to talk about genocide in our backyard and that sort of thing. And then I think once we build some stamina, then perhaps, you know, we're really going to be able to give our kids something, right? So, yeah.
I think that's a really important point too, and I'm sure you got something to say on that, Carrie, but I'm just thinking that, you know, there's this privilege of forgetting, right? There's this privilege of not being able to, or not being required to remember. And I hope what is interesting, what's happening right now is that with days like today, with the National Day for Truth, well, like days like tomorrow, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, is that privilege that so many in Canadian society have enjoyed about not knowing this history will be interrupted. Because it's clear that moving forward, we do have to keep talking about this and we have to keep revisiting this. And this is not something that is going to go away, and that we are anchoring this day into our future for very legitimate and real reasons, not just taking into account, you know, broad international human rights principles, but by the sheer necessity of saying that we cannot forget and that we have to anchor this with as rigorous a step as, you know, a distinct pause in society where we actually say, this is so important, we actually need to stop what we're doing and reflect. And that's incredibly powerful that we have this opportunity now. But I don't know, Carrie, what do you see with this National Day moving forward? Like, we've got this opportunity and...
I'm going to pick up on something Val said about having dreams big enough to encompass everything that's possible. And wanting to find ways to celebrate, because I think that that's part of the counterbalance. For me, that's how I get braced when I feel worn down and like my stamina is wearing out. Where do I turn? I turn to my family. At various times, each of us go through that. I turn to my friends, and they're there to carry me when I can't, you know, when I can't be strong. But this idea of having big dreams, that's exciting to me, because so often when we start out a conversation about something that we want to do together, people will throw out ideas and we'll have, you know, like, we'll all pick something that in a committee or a group or a collective that you want to do, and then we start to talk about how we're going to do it. And then this person has one idea, this person has another idea, and pretty soon the process gets bogged down to the point where it actually starts to restrict the dream itself. And maybe that's where kind of as an artist, because people like forget about us while we go off and do our creative stuff, where it kind of, I don't know, sets me free a little bit in the way that I do things, because it's not, a creative idea isn't necessarily dependent on a collective decision. It very often requires a whole bunch of help to get it there. Pick any of the projects, the bigger projects that I've been involved with, and I couldn't have done them without a huge amount of support from community, but they kind of came from a dream, and a big enough dream that, you know, that I couldn't do it on my own. And I think when we're talking about future, that's maybe a barrier that we don't recognize as always being placed in front of us, or that we're always part of placing in front of ourselves. Like, you have the big idea, and then you start to think about the practicalities of it, and instead of going with faith or with your heart and with some belief that things will come together, we start to restrict it into something that we feel like we can manage. And then you wouldn't have an Indigenous law degree.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that we wouldn't have if we let the practicality of how to achieve it get in the way of starting. So that's kind of my response to all of what's being talked about right here, because that's where I go when I disappear and create stuff.
Well, I think of some of what you shared with me too, Carrie, and I think you're really right that even this day, this opportunity that we have together was somebody's dream. And I've certainly heard from many, many residential school survivors that they could never even believe that the apology was even possible, or the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or all of these things. I certainly, when I started with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I didn't necessarily have a dream that this would occur, and we're now on the precipice of this actually occurring. And it reminds me of something that you've shared with me before, and for like, hopefully I get this right, but where you talk about your practice in carving, and how if you look at the entire length of the pole, it gets a little overwhelming, but you're able to focus on that task that's in front of you. And there's something in that, I guess, for today even, right?
I think there's something in that every day. You know, you do what's in front of you. You do what you can do with your hands in the moment. And you have to either have that commitment to keep going, or you have to make space for other people to help you achieve it. Because if you carry it all, and I'm pretty bad for that actually, if you try to carry it all, then it gets too heavy, and that's where the stamina starts to wear out.
Stamina is a big one. Val, you have any?
So I started law school when I became a grandmother, and somebody told me, you're going to run into all kinds of people, and they're going to be as smart as or smarter than you, and the only thing that's going to make a difference here is stamina. And I started training. So that's one aspect. But I think what Carrie has said, and then the mention of your grandson, like those are other ways of building our emotional stamina, our mental stamina, our spiritual stamina. Like those are also all part of who we are. And once we have that and are able to restore ourselves and the people around us, then we can share that with others. We can share that with students. We can share that with community peoples and so on. And then and then our spirits are continued to be fed by that. So, I know that, like sometimes, you can make fun of optimism because, you don't want to be a Pollyanna. But pessimism is, I heard was the worst form of arrogance, right? That somehow that we can foresee a negative future as opposed to a positive one. I mean, that's never made much sense to me. So we have choices about seeing the fullness of things and the richness of things and paying attention to that, even if we don't agree, and doing that in respectful ways. That feeds us too. And we, part of each other's spirit, as I said earlier, is that holding each other up, right? And that's what we need to do, and we need to do it every single day in every way we can. And now I sound like really a Pollyanna, but I'm not, okay?
Well, and I think about, the good words that we've heard Robina share so many times too, that are actually part of our Indigenous plan here at UVic, and it's be prepared for the work to come, but bring in your good thoughts. Bring in your good thoughts, and that's certainly something that I've heard time and time again is like, back home, the elders start with the positive, and go to that place and focus on the healing. And I think that's the opportunity that really still lays in front of us, is that we can do better than we're doing right now. Like there is something like a better, more respectful world that we can build together. you know, and I think it is going to take all of us working together, because it's such a monumental task of both deconstructing the systems of oppression and then rebuilding the systems, or building the systems, or recentering the systems that actually promote life, right, and promote healing. And I don't know, I mean, Donna, do you have any thoughts on, you know, that vitally important work of, you know, that life promotion and that healing work? I mean, that healing seems so central, both in your research and then, you know, already what we've talked about in this panel here.
Well, I mean, it's such a personal journey, healing, and it's so, what healing means to me doesn't apply to everybody else. And you know, my parents passed away before any recognition for residential school was ever given, and so, you know, I have to sit back and take in what my colleagues are saying by way of dream. And I think perhaps maybe they did hold a dream, you know, that the day would come where there would be some justice for the injustices that they experienced. So I want to think in those, you know, those kind of terms, and dream big, and dream in a way that my grandson doesn't have to continue to do my work in 20 years, like just pick up where I've left off, right? So I want to be optimistic that we would be able collectively to do that work, and that's not the work of me and my people or my family, that it's all of our work. So, and I mean, we're here today and we have people listening, and in that respect, I can say, you know, I have gone from despair to hope, and that's, again, a teaching of mine, is not to stay in despair, but turn to hope. And I, you know, sometimes I get caught up in how dismal the future can be because of climate change and so on and so forth. But, you know, I want to try and stay present and optimistic and focus on what it is I can do now, and not get caught up in the future that hasn't come yet, but to try and pave the way with like swallowing, you know, the good heart and the good mind, and encourage others as well. Yeah, just really, yeah, try and bring that balance of the criticalness of reconciliation, but also perhaps what lies beneath that I'm not aware of yet that could result in something good for our grandchildren.
So we're coming to about the close of the panel, and I want to make sure that we provide some opportunities for thoughts, and I just really want to leave it open to anyone to just speak. I mean, it's, yeah.
One of the things that I've been thinking about is, what might we say to the spirits of the children who've been found? And sometimes, you know, when I think about that, I want to say, you know, as Indigenous peoples, to quote my friend John Burroughs, we're beautiful and we're messed up. And there's beauty in the world. We're capable of great love, just as we're capable of great harms. I'd want those to share with those spirits Carrie's art, you know, the scholarship of my colleagues, the fact that we're here, the fact that there are hardworking people who care very deeply about their families and their futures. I'd want those children to know that their futures, that beyond where they were brought to an end, that there is still strength and beauty beyond, despite everything, and that they matter, to the beauty of the future. Somehow, like, what are we going to say to those spirits?
I was just thinking about the word hope, and the underlying kind of weight, and just the way that we've talked about how we carry things forward into the future. And I also recognize a few dear friends out who've come here, and one in particular I talked a lot with about when I first finished the witness blanket, and it felt like that was the biggest thing that I was ever going to achieve. And in a lot of ways I still think that's true, but it kind of set my mind thinking about, well, what could I do that might have a similar amount of impact or power that would bring people into a project in the way that that one has. And I kind of jokingly started talking about this idea of a hope totem, and that I was going to carve this totem and we were going to fill it up with hope from all around the world. And people would say, what do you mean? And I say, well, think about the hopes that people who have far less than we do, and what would we learn from hearing about their hopes? So that was kind of an idea, like one of those pie in the sky dreams. And slowly it's evolved because climate is taking away our old growth ecosystems. So, well, climate is part of the problem, but it's obviously, deforestation is the first part of that. But so I've decided I'm not carving old growth cedar anymore, and trying to find new ways of making poles that are still connected to cedar. They're still the same scale and majesty of the ones that we see around here on campus, or the ones that we see around our communities. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. But it led me to this idea of, and that's what led me to start to knock on the door of the Indigenous law program again. I'm working on building this project called the Seedling, where and Ry thought maybe I was going to get out of this conversation without saying seedling.
I was just waiting for it. Yeah.
where we're going to plant Western red cedar seedlings, design a totem in 3D software, and commit to making and raising the pole when the tree is mature, and thinking about that artwork on that time scale, and our future on that time scale. And that one is exciting for me, because how do you protect an idea like that? You change your relationship with land, right? Because if we plant it on a piece of property and the property gets sold, what happens to the tree? Maybe we have to find a way to set that property free. And so anyways, that's the kind of big idea, I think, that comes from challenging ourselves. And so I'm going to just lean over here so I can look at Kevin and get the thumbs up. We're still good to go on this one. Yeah.
But it's I think what I hear you saying there, Carrie, and just actually before we turn it over to Kevin and give Kevin the opportunity to share with us his vision for the future of the university here is you're talking about a much longer sense of time too. And I think one of the things that I really appreciate in the conversations that I've had with you in regards to your vision there is that, again, we're thinking intergenerationally, and not just one or two or three, but generations upon generations upon generations, and thinking about how our actions of today affect those generations. And what are their rights? What are the rights of those future generations to have their dreams, have their futures protected? And I think, we hear the words, it takes a community to raise a child, it takes a community to grow a seedling. It takes a community to protect a future, I guess, as well, and to really value that future, and to breathe life into all of those dreams that we all possess and carry. And we talk about equity and equality, and there certainly has been an inequality of futures in this country. When we think about those children, many of their futures were taken away unjustly, unrightfully. So that's the healing work, is to breathe life into these futures and let our dreams soar, I suppose. So I really want to thank each and every one of you, Val, Don, Carrie. Thank you for all that you do, all your hard work, all your dreams that you're dreaming, all the dreams that you're helping instill in students, and community members and our fellow community members across the country. I would like to turn it over to our president, Kevin Hall, to bring some remarks and to offer some thoughts as we come into the close of this long day of ceremony. And yeah, over to you.
All right, well, thanks, Ry. And I wanted to first start by thanking the IACE team, because this has been just an absolutely incredible week of events, of films and panels and ceremonies, and this wouldn't have happened without really some amazing work behind the scenes. So thanks to you. And to our speakers, to Val, to Dawn, and to Carrie, you know, thanks for what you bring to this university. It is part of what makes this university very unique, and we absolutely treasure the contributions that you make. And Carrie, we will do the seedling. And also to Ry, thanks for being the MC, and your courage and conviction is absolutely contagious. And in the short time that we've had you here at UVic, we've just seen the impact that you've made. So thanks for that. And I wanted to thank everybody for making this part of your day who's out here. And really to remind you, it's important to remember, tomorrow is not a holiday. Tomorrow is a day for reflection. It's a day for listening. It's a day for learning. It's a day that really needs to be respected. And it's fantastic it's actually occurred. But make sure tomorrow is valuable for you. So I'm really deeply appreciative for listening to the panel today, and I was asked to listen to the panel, to write copious notes, and I haven't done lecture notes for over 40 years, so excuse me, but to really reflect on what the panel said, and then really to try to weave that into the future for us at UVic and how we might approach the future. And it seems to me there were some common thoughts coming up. And from Val, we heard the past informs dreams, but don't let the past restrict your dreams, which is a really valuable lesson. You know, Dawn had a similar thoughts around, we've got an ugly history. We've got a contemporary environment, which is actually not that pretty. It's full of racism. We need to spend time with the truth, and the university has a huge role to play with the truth. And Carrie was talking about honoring the past, respecting the present, and being responsible for the future, and thinking out about children's children's children. And I think that's a really powerful message for us. And so what's that make our journey look like? What's UVic's role in this journey of hope? And I'll start off by governance. Val, you mentioned governance, and governance is a necessary piece of our society, but I would say our universities are based on governance systems that are 200 years old. We're only 50 years old, but you know, our governance is much older. And governance is often we're told we have governance because we want to have equity for everybody. Our governance is failing us. I think we have to look at our governance to see how we can accelerate decolonization in a meaningful way for our local communities. We have to accelerate the ability for self-determination through using things like UNDRIP as we move forward. And, you know, as you said, Don, we have to really start to be involved in telling the truth, and the university has a huge role to play. We've already started some of our work around governance, and we've created the position of the Associate Vice President Indigenous, and Kwasi Amet, Robina Thomas, is sitting out there and responsible for much of the change we've seen in a very short 5 months she's been in the role. It's important that Robina's job is not located in just the academic department or not just the research department. It's located across the whole institution in the President's office. And it will change the way we look at our education and research, our teaching and learning, but it will change the way we act as an institution, the way we reach out into the community, the way we purchase goods, the way just the way we stand together to support the future. We have to support our academic caucus. The three of these people sitting up here have day jobs as academics. They're held to the same bar that we hold all of our academics, yet they have a huge tax They're mentors, advisors, community advisors. They talk to colleagues across the country. We have to deal with that in our system. And we don't do a good job, so we have to change the way we look at performance, promotion, and tenure, all of those things we love to talk about in academia. And we're committed to that. For students, it's important that we create that welcoming and safe environment, that environment that doesn't have racism at every corner that you turn. And we've got a lot of work to do towards that. And I also think, you know, we need to be an exemplar in our community. We've got a lot of issues we need to deal with on our own campus. But once we get off our campus, things become even worse. And how do we act as an exemplar in this community? How do we change the attitudes and the thoughts of other Canadians in the Greater Victoria area? How do we be a leader in telling the truth and utilizing Indigenous knowledge to change our laws and to change our regulations? And just a small example that I was involved in Newcastle, Australia, where I lived for 7 years, was actually telling the Indigenous story through plaques within the city. So rather than saying Captain Cook landed in this harbor in 1862, the story now says 1,600 Worimi were slaughtered at this location at the hands of the British. And so we have a role to play in that. We have a role to learn the truth and to get out there and speak the truth. And I say, just to conclude, you know, one of the truths of the findings of the TRC was that education through the Indian residential schools was an instrument of violence that did huge damage to the Indigenous peoples across the country. But the TRC also spoke to education of being a way forward, and I truly think our educational institutions are. We've got the responsibility to ensure that our students, faculty, and staff are knowledgeable about the history of abuse and racism with respect to the Indigenous peoples of Canada and the enduring and negative impacts of colonialism. We've got to find ways of moving forward beyond just talking. We've got to take bold action, including some of the work that's been discussed today and some of the things that we've heard about today. We have to rise to the challenge of anti-racism education. We've got to embrace our responsibility to ensure Indigenous students enter a welcoming and respectful learning environment. We have to ensure that our Indigenous academics and Indigenous staff have exactly the same environment. We've got to work to decolonize in a way that's meaningful to our local Indigenous communities. And we've got to support self-determination by engaging those principles of UNDRIP. It's going to require a redistribution of power, and those with power are going to have to agree to give some up. The conversations that lie ahead concerning decision-making, governance, research, and teaching methods are going to be hard. They're going to be difficult. But we've heard people speak of hope today. So although it's hard work, it's heavy on the heart, we've got so much more to do. So I want to thank again all the speakers on this panel, all the speakers today, for IACE, for everybody participating. Let's all work together to make this a better place. Thanks.
Well, thank you, President Hall, for those closing remarks and for what I hear as being a very clear vision for the change that's necessary and forthcoming. I too want to reiterate and echo just the sincere appreciation to the entire team that was behind making this day possible. From the firekeepers, again, thank you so much. For the people that brought the wood, our technicians, the incredible team here at the university that has come together, that assembled the fire circle again here, that set up the chairs, that prepared the food that we shared earlier today. Earlier today, we did gather and honor the elders today over in the ceremonial hall as well, and it took an entire community of people coming together to say just how much we love those elders and how much we value their presence. And we can't say thank you enough. Thank you as well to all of you that have stayed. It's hard to put into words just how much that really means, because when we talk about the future, you are the future. We are the future. How we opt into this National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, how we pick up this work of healing is up to us to embrace and to reinvest in each and every day. So I really sincerely want to say thank you for staying and for listening to these incredible panelists and for carrying their thoughts with you in their hearts, in your hearts. With that, I'd like to invite Eugene and Christine up to the stage again. I saw them around here somewhere to bring us into the close. They opened the day earlier. We started with ceremony, so we're now going to close it out today. And certainly on my behalf, as being your MC today, I really want to say how much I valued spending this time with you, and I wish you and your families the very, very best. And thanks for inviting me into this circle today.
Hi, Chika. At this moment, I'd like to apologize on behalf of my brother. He had work to rush off to. He tried to get today off, but unfortunately could not. And so I'd like to apologize on his behalf, and you guys now just have me. Thank you. I honestly love having a brother and just siblings in general. Like, they've been my go-to, and we always have each other for these times and needs to just remind each other how to keep going. And that's all we need is family. And I'm very fortunate my Auntie Diane could help direct us and keep our life going and keep us busy in this way. So I really would like to take this time to thank UVic and my Auntie Diane and our speakers. And I'd love to echo our last speaker, who thanked all of you for listening to us today. It's unbelievable for the amount you'd like to hear us and just sit and listen, and that is more than enough. That is more than what we need. We just need your listening ears at this time, because that's what's going to uplift all our hearts. So hi, Chika. The song I'll be sharing with you today is called the Prayer Song, and it is a song that we sing with our Lekwungen dancer group from Songhees. We sing with our Grandma Dell and her daughters, Lila and Beth Dick, and there are teachers who have taught us the songs we know through our drum. Our grandmothers had taught us how to pray to our Creator, growing up right from when we're infant to today. So the prayer song was given to us by an elder, our local elder, and this is our way of singing it. So I'd like to thank you all again for today. Hi, Chika. TV at sunset. not sunset. Not so quick. Period sunset. Period sunset. Dite conditie. What period sunset. Not so quick. Hey,
Hi, thank you once again, everyone, for being here and staying until the end and being a part of this event. I once again want to raise my hand to everyone here that worked for UVic for making this event possible. And I apologize for running in the middle of the song. I just got off of work. But thank you each and every one of you once again, and thank you for having us, to be here, to be part of the special day, and for being part of this beautiful event. Hi, Tapka.
Hi, Chikasi. That was a beautiful, beautiful surprise. I've never felt so lonely. I'm so used to we've always been together. I'm very happy to have siblings. I can't say that enough. Hi, Chikasi. Thank you.